Welcome back to Top 5 Scary. I'm your horrifying host, Kyle McWaters, and this week we're getting ghostly with the top 5 stories from mental asylums that will give you nightmares. Number 5. The Allegheny Asylum. Built in the Civil War era in West Virginia, this asylum was designed to house around 250 patients, but ended up housing more than 2,500 people. People locked in cages, lobotomized with ice picks, tied to the beds. It's safe to say that this place is a nightmare in itself. Since the asylum was briefly a Civil War military base and absolutely haunted to the core, people have spotted uniformed soldier ghosts strolling the corridors. Patients were previously admitted into the asylum for a variety of reasons, including asthma, laziness, egotism, and even greediness. This was a different time. This led to more and more patients being admitted, causing the asylum to overflow with staff and bedding. It is said that the most famous ghost is the presence of a small girl named Lily. She was either a former patient or a child of one of the housing staff or patients. Back then, it was very common for women to be admitted while pregnant. One thing's for sure, she spent her childhood and her afterlife stuck within these walls. Ghost hunters make contact with her spirit all the time, apparently. Staff members say that there are always toys strewn out on the 4th floor, and Lily's been known to move them around herself. Small balls rolling down the hallway on their own, running footsteps and voices can be heard playing with things on the floor. Lily is known for her loud laughter, as well as her interest in playing games with staff and visitors. Other experiences include dark shadows, objects moving on their own, disembodied voices and cries. This place is haunted. Today the asylum is used as a historic and ghostly tour hotspot in which haunting stories combined with the decaying look of the structure creates the contrast that the asylum is well known for. The asylum itself was created with good intentions. It was meant to treat people who need care, but soon it became misused and the people it originally meant to care for were horribly. After closing its doors for good in 1994, they reopened to educate and tell the tales of the patients themselves who lived and died within these walls. Number 4. Danvers State Hospital. Located about 21 miles north of Boston, the hospital opened on May 1st, 1878, and the hospital's first patients arrived only days later. The inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft and Batman's Arkham Asylum due to its gothic look and its twisted patients. This asylum followed in the same footsteps of any classic mental asylum. It was only meant for about 500 patients, but ended up housing around 2,500. Low staff, no rooms, and of course treatments such as shock therapy and lobotomies. This asylum was the very first to operate the transorbital lobotomy, where an ice pick is inserted through the eye socket and into the brain. Ouch. The staff started to experiment with this new method on the elderly, mentally disabled, alcoholics, drug addicts, and insane criminals. The staff used treatments like shock therapy and lobotomies even when they didn't need to. Of course, due to the extreme methods of controlling patients and the push for science, patients started dying there, and their bodies were found days and months later. The cruelty just began. The doctors were using lobotomies to cure anything from daydreaming and backaches to delusions and depression. Visitors described how dirty the patients always looked, how they were creepily wandering the halls and sometimes even blankly staring off into space. Some of these patients weren't even suffering from anything, and the extremes of the treatments are what drove them insane. The asylum was of course shut down and its building demolished. Some patients left the asylum while others are spending eternity under its grounds. The asylum's buildings don't exist anymore, but its cemetery does. Danvers State Hospital closed on June 24, 1992 due to budget cuts within the mental health system. And the 770 patients who died at Danvers were buried in the numbered lots on the property, with the hospital replacing traditional headstones with patient numbers. This is just one act of cruelty and dehumanization the hospital was known for. Number 3. Rolling Hills Asylum. Located in Bethany, New York, Rolling Hills Asylum was established in 1826 as a poor farm or poorhouse, which was an institution built by the government to house and maintain orphans, widowed women, the disabled, the mentally ill, and of course, children. The staff did their best to keep unsafe patients away from the general population, but problems soon ensued. As a result, a solitary confinement cell was constructed in the building, and those who lived there were often referred to as, quote, the inmates. In 2008, Carrie Kearns, the co-founder of ghost hunting Sea Pier, did an overnight public ghost hunt at Rolling Hills. Arriving around 4 p.m., we went to Rolling Hills to get some pictures during the day. The doors opened for the public ghost hunt at 9:30. There were said to be 50 people present during the ghost hunt, and there were 2 tour groups. We used devices such as digital audio recorders, video recorders with night vision, thermometer gauge EMFs, flash cameras, the works. A ghost box and sound amplifier were also present. We did catch some orbs in many pictures, with some being more impressive than others. What appears to be a mist or a smog coming out from behind the nurse's station door scared us. On film, on the second floor, doors of the solarium move on their own. Even shadows of people standing and walking behind the doors appeared. We also caught some EVPs with our digital audio recorders, with a voice of what sounds like an elderly lady screaming, quote, "You, go away." When in the electrotherapy room, I had 2 episodes of sharp pain that lasted approximately 1 minute to the left side of my head and right above my eye. Twice in the electrotherapy room. Around 4 a.m., Mike and I traveled from the area of the organ room down to the second hallway and sat against the sides of the hall. While Mike and I sat there, I began to feel something touch and crawl up my right leg. As that happened, another shadow peeking from around the corner of one of the doors made us super uncomfortable. It was just staring at us. While investigating on the 3rd floor, there were sounds of someone walking around. I felt the touch of a hand touch my face, and a couple seconds later, one of the other investigators further down the hallway said she felt something holding her hands squeezing hard. I wonder what this mist was. Sounds like some Ghostbusters plasma right there. Number 2, Pennhurst Asylum. In October 2019, Ripley's Believe It or Not spent a night at one of the most chilling and gruesome asylums that ever stood. Pennhurst Asylum in Pennsylvania has been called many things. Ghost Ward, the Crazy Kids, and of course, one of the most haunted asylums on Earth. The team spent a night and had this to say about its history and their experiences. Pennhurst's long history of misconduct of children, for example, used punishments such as the removal of children's teeth if they were labeled a biter. The employees' cruelty has been well documented over the years, and is that of Dr. Jesse G. Fear. Literally the worst name for a doctor. Chris Levine, an open-minded skeptic, and Flip Searless, team leader, were just a few of the crew who spent the night with a variety of audio recording devices. Apparently the Echo Vox, which is a tool for investigators, started playing kids jingles. Quote, "We were getting a lot of different children's songs, but the one on repeat was Pop Goes the Weasel." It was pretty terrifying because we heard kids singing along with the Echo Vox in the background. Flip had asked, "Can you see us?" And the children's voice on the spirit box came back and said, "Yes." "How do you see us?" And the kid's voice said, "As ghosts." As we head down into the basement, a prominent ghostly figure is waiting for us. The King. A menacing figure popular with the paranormal enthusiasts who visited Pennhurst over her years. The King was a maintenance worker here from the 40s. His domain? The boiler room. He was not well, and he was known to treat the patients cruelly. He's known to come across on EVPs as a large, shadowy figure creeping around corners, and he'll even touch you. Though they're uncertain if he's a poltergeist or demonic entity, he's come across with a creepy laugh. He told us his name, and the crew even had a full conversation with him. After listening to the Ghost Box recording, the team were nervous when they heard the King yelling, "Leave, leave, leave." We started on the right foot because I offered him a cigarette and asked him if he wanted to smoke. He said yes. Fast forward 10 minutes and he clearly did not want us in that room. He would just repeatedly yell, "Leave." That's horrifying. After asking what would happen if we didn't leave, the King's voice screamed, "Choke." Spooky. Okay. And coming in at number 1, Waverly Hills. Opened in 1910 in Louisville, Kentucky as a 2-story hospital to accommodate 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients, Waverly Hills earns its gruesome history from its tortured patients, ghastly medical experiments, and the infamous body slide, aka body chute, aka the death tunnel, where the dead were transported down and collected at the bottom by a group of staff who would collect them to be cremated or buried. A true ghost tale has featured numerous stories by visitors to Waverly Hills Sanatorium. In one of these cases, an experience was of Mary Lee. She was a young woman who lived in the sanatorium while it was open. On September 10th, 2006, Tom Halstead of Missouri Paranormal Research took a photograph of a ghostly apparition that looked almost exactly like Mary. Some believe Mary is the nurse who hung herself in the haunted room 502, while others believe she contracted tuberculosis herself from a prolonged exposure to patients due to the sounds that they hear, mostly coughs. Whoever this mysterious woman is, she's been captured and feared for decades. Doppelgangers, also known as double walkers, are a type of spirit that mimic the appearance, voice, and mannerisms of anyone it encounters. At Waverly Hills, looking across the room and seeing the exact replica of yourself is pretty common. Even tour guides at Waverly Hills have reported seeing doppelgangers of themselves, and in some cases, the doppelgangers were almost identical except for gaping black holes where the eyes should be. Probably the most famous spirit at Waverly Hills is a little boy known as Timmy. Timmy was around 6 years old when he died in the hospital. Since he died with his whole life ahead of him, his spirit can't move on, and he wanders the hospital in search of life. Visitors often bring toys or bring small balls for him to play with, and many claim that they see the balls bouncing on their own, slamming against the wall, halls or whipped at high speed down the hallways. One thing's for certain, this place is one of the most haunted. We've come quite a long way since the quote asylum age of ice picks and straitjackets. From asylums to modern psychiatric hospitals, understanding mental health is integral to us as a species and at the very core of our understanding of what makes us human. If you enjoyed some of those scary stories, hit me with a thumbs up down below. Shoot me a comment down below as well, what other places I'm too chicken to research myself. And as always, keep the lights on, the doors locked. I'm Kyle McWaters. Stay spooky, everybody.